We are back. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about the fourth most popular question searched for on Google.
How long?
How long does or should sex last?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of myths and a lot of truths and a lot of different information on this. So I'm very excited to jump in.
Well, let's answer the question first. How long does sex, on average, actually last?
Okay, tell us.
Well, the average, which means that it ends with the male part ejaculating, is around 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay.
Now, when surveyed what is the desired amount of time for how long sex should last, and therapists came back with that on average it should be around 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
And when then surveyed asking specifically women how long the active sex should last, it was the 25 minutes was kind of like the ideal, but like 15 to 25, something like that.
Okay. So let's talk about a little bit what happens when bodies start to move together and in the initial 5 to 7 minutes, what's going on in the nervous system, in the hormones, and even in sensation. Because I know in a female body, if I'm not even warmed up, and the main act is the penetrative act, 5 minutes for me would barely bring my pleasure system online.
Well, so what happens a lot of times then in those first 5 minutes is that the bodies are actually relaxing from a lot of kind of tension from the anticipation, which then allows for then sex to kind of naturally unfurl into lots of different layers of pleasure and sensation. Now, what normally happens, the reason why sex a lot of times will end between those 5 to 7 minutes is because there is so much tension between the bodies and the nervous systems don't get to calibrate that the tension ends up causing the person on the receiving side to tighten up, normally feel some pain or not really be able to relax and feel much at all. And the person that is then entering is normally overly excited, which then causes them to either lose the erection because just loss of the erection, or to ejaculate very quickly, and then the sex act ends. Now, premature ejaculation, technically, if you've lasted 5 to 7 minutes, it's not considered that.
Yes.
Some definitions will be, well, if it happens before you want it to.
Yes.
But the technical definition
Ejaculatory choice.
Yes, exactly. So we're going to talk about that because technically premature ejaculation, even if it happens accidentally at that 5 to 7 minutes, it wouldn't count. But we've noticed, though, that when bodies instead start to become entrained and used to one another and synchronized, all of a sudden now a sexual act can even go way beyond the 15 to 25 minute mark, which the reason why most people are saying that they don't want to go beyond the 15 to 25 minute mark is because of friction, meaning that there's a lot of banging that's happened and the person either starts to physically feel pain, or they start to numb out, or you become bored, which essentially boredom is the psychological component to not feeling much sensation.
Right. I also think...
also can be angry too if you're getting banged into for a long time.
Yeah, or just fear, those other things. I think for extending, like if you took into consideration what we talked about in the episode around the art of penetration, that can take a half hour to just do all those things. Just the entering part. So there is ways of extending lovemaking so that it's quite delicious. But anyways, we'll go back to the normative friction sex experience for the majority.
Which is kind of what you see inside of porn, and that has a tendency to focus on one person on the receiving side being very tight or squeezing to create more sensation and the other person, whereas the one person on the receiving side should be really small and tight, the other person on the giving side needs to be big, harder, and move faster to create this kind of friction like fire sensation in the body.
We also heard from many different doctors and therapists that the normal description of good sex for women is that it doesn't hurt. So not only are we having a small timeline. Now, okay, occasionally in life, quickies important and necessary. I think we should do an episode on quickies. And lasting 25 minutes for, say, people who have children could be like an ideal length of time, just because they are tired, they've got a lot of things to do, and they don't have time for a 3-hour.
But then again, it's ending because you're wanting it to,
Yes.
not ending because you either have to get the person with the penis to ejaculate, or because it's like, oh, this is hurting now.
So I think what's important, the distinction that I'd like to make in this episode, it's the quality of the sex versus quantity, and versus like how long it has to be. So if you have extremely delicious connected quickie, can leave you desiring more, your whole system lit up. I mean, I think it's amazing when you can have that kind of fire, and then you go back into your work day and you're all juicy and you're thinking about the person when you can, and yeah, it just can charge the relationship. Yes. Instead of like feel like, okay, I did my duty and I don't need to think about this for a while.
So if you answer the question then directly from that perspective, how long does or should sex last, then it's, well, 1, as long as it's pleasurable.
Yes.
And 2, it should be as leaving you at a place, and I'm not going to say always, but a lot of times leaving you at a place where you're actually wanting more.
Yes. Yes. And that's the quality of the sex.
So now, you're both satisfied, like, oh, I've gotten what I want, this is really good, but as opposed to like, okay, now I'm not going to want it for a week, it's like, oh, and I could have more, and so that your body stays open and desirous.
And in fact, I'm kind of pro creating that, which is in the other episode I mentioned soft entry, hard exit of the old Taoist saying.
Yes.
So being able to exit hard means you finish before you finish.
Yes. In other words, it's stopping when the both of you want to,
yes.
Not just has the person ejaculated, Jen.
Exactly.
So what is that like then? Can you maybe tell a little bit about this? You talk about a lot of times this relaxed arousal state. So if you're ending sex where you're still hard, doesn't that just mean you're both just going to be really irritated and agitated because you didn't like relieve yourself, or one person didn't relieve themselves?
So in Chinese medicine, the heart, when it's, say, contracted or closed, creates impatience.
So this could be like you're emotionally not available.
Exactly.
It also could mean physically, like you're guarding.
Yeah, you guarding.
With your shoulders rolled
forward. Or you haven't intentionally chosen to breathe and expand, open this area. You also have hastiness, so you're in a rush to get something done with.
Yes.
So impatience, hastiness, and then even can go into apathy. Those are signs that the heart center is
closed.
It's not properly activated.
Yes.
Let's call it that way. So if you're having a really quality quickie, part of quality sex is to also open your chest, open your lungs, let yourself feel and sense into that heart space. It doesn't have to mean that this is your forever and ever person. If you have a lover or multiple lovers, or you're just having a fun little shindig here and there, or it could be your forever person. But whatever the case, a lot of times we're having disconnected sex, meaning it's just the genitals coming together, and we're not actually understanding that the heart fire, the energy of an open, enthusiastic, joyful, felt state is actually fueling the genitals. And that kind of fuel is the big fire. And that actually can extend and empower, like the potency of an erection, for example. It can extend and engorge the vulva far more when the heart is open. It can allow for the cervix to participate more in the sexual act as well when the heart is more available, let's say, that way. So how do we activate that? Just by sighing. Sighing is like, just like, because it releases that tension and stress that we are holding in the chest. So even just on a physiological level, you may not have deep emotion with the person, but make your physiology available to the experience.
This could have been something we could actually have spoken about in the how to come or how to make her come, because that was the number 2 Google search question.
Yes.
Is that, again, it's not about the person doing, it's about on the person on the receiving side, that as you start to go into orgasmic kind of more breath, as opposed to inhaling slightly and exhaling and squeezing. Instead, if you can inhale as deeply as possible and then not even force it out, but just
relax.
Relax. And not again, it's not even a controlled
excuse me,
like where you time the breath out. It's just literally a like let the air come out of the balloon, you know.
Let's try it for a couple moments. Just let's do like 3 aroused heart breaths.
So I want you to breathe in, feel that chest expand, and the key is that you're going to exhale and relax, but the effort is focusing on getting more air in and then relaxing. Okay, so it's breathe in and then breathe in. Try and fill up even more. Now bring your voice in. There you go. So you'll probably notice that you'll feel even a little bit of lightheadedness a bit. There'll probably be some buzzing. Warmth. Okay, yes. And really, like I'm still actually feeling the effects build as I've stopped here and gone into the relaxed still state because I've literally just hyperoxygenated my body.
Yes.
But it's that relaxing as you let go and not controlling, but just letting the air come out of your nose and out of your mouth, relaxing your jaw. So you're not breathing through the nose here at this point. Even if you want to get into technically, maybe you are inhaling through the nose, but just really that relaxing, allowing that tongue to sink down, the jaw to be open, and sighing out. This creates this kind of like trance-like timeless state that literally then you've connected to the sensorial part of your body that then allows you to be, that's what you follow and allowed to decide, is this still feeling good? We surf each other's waves of pleasure, and this will determine how long it lasts, whether it happens to be just a quickie for 3 minutes that just seems super powerful, super impactful, and then stopping, or that then you go for a longer period of time. But what I would say is, well, how long should it last? Well, once you've had your quickie, taking a little bit of time, or even a longie, let's say, is taking the time then to have some stillness after. That could be the two of you laying side by side on top of each other, but having some body contact and some stillness, connecting and breathing before maybe then even having a little bit of space between the two of you, and then just sitting and lying in your space is a crucial part. So if you can make part of this kind of integration phase of where you integrate all the sensations, pleasure, appreciating the connection that you had with that person, even if it is just for 15 seconds, 30 seconds, because it's been this quickie and you got to go, or you then just take a nap together. But looking at this as part of the sexual act and how long, quote unquote, sex should last, think of it in terms of these phases. There's the arousal phase, there's the excitement phase, there is the restful integration phase, and then it could maybe cycle and start again. But allow for this kind of cycle of at least those 3 things to happen will determine more in terms of how long things should last from a sensorial body perspective, as opposed to, looking at the clock.
Yeah, again, it's not about watching the clock and timing, going, ooh, I'm a hero, I made it to 15 minutes. It's more like, what is the quality of the connection during that time? The phase that you described, the quiet phase, the integrative phase, is also known as yin phase.
Tell us a little bit about the yin versus yang phase.
Yeah, so yin just means receptive. Yang means active. So receptive phase. Why is that crucial? So if we're looking at rewriting neural pathways, for example, first of all, oxytocin. So when you're having sex, you're generating a lot of oxytocin. Oxytocin is a neurotransmitter. Oxytocin allows for your nerves to become more plastic, so you can actually learn more and grow more. So
also creates pair bonding.
Yes, but that plasticity of the nerves, say you're having a quickie during a work day, will actually make you able to learn more and do more and make more connections than not. So that yin phase is actually crucial, not only to help you just accept and absorb the beauty that you just experienced, but also allowing your nervous system to calibrate. So that's a very, very important phase of kind of optimizing a neuroplasticity. So you definitely want a little bit of that downtime.
Also, too, Nicole Prouse speaks about a lot of the benefits that we get to the body is everything that happens before the peak orgasm and everything drops off. So again, if your focus isn't to just have the person ejaculate or even just to have a clitoral orgasm, but instead to stay in this heightened state of arousal as opposed to it being the thing that distracts you, actually these are the benefits that once you become used to this added energy, sort of like when you started to work out, going to the gym feels good because you just stay in a state of more alertness, more readiness. You can like get into exercising. The same way, if you keep your body in a state of arousal, you also are going to be producing a lot of different hormones that are going to help with anti-aging, that are going to help with overall emotional stability, relational robustness, to be able to handle your own, regulate your own nervous system. And frankly, it just feels really good to be in a state of pleasure.
Yes, and that calibration also makes you more magnetic. So they've looked at, I don't know if it's a formal study or not, but I just remember reading something recently that that glow, that afterglow of sex is actually incredibly magnetic. And so whether it's a self-pleasuring afterglow or a connected sexual experience afterglow, there's a magnetism to it. The whole makeup industry is based on making women look like they just came. You know, that's the premise between making your lips a redder color, your cheeks a redder color, like brightening up the eyes, all and making them whiter. It's all that post, orgasmic bliss look.
Or heightened arousal state even before the orgasm.
So I want to come back to something that's really important to us as our mission. And one is that bringing back deeper pleasure into the act of sex. And so how long, when you ask that question and you look at it through the lens of pleasure, how long should sex last? Now I want to propose that we are always in the act of lovemaking. Sometimes the bodies come together and are connected
on a physical level.
But as lovers, even when we come apart and we move into other things that we're doing,
meaning one person maybe stays at home, the other one drives off to work, or you
whatever,
both drive off.
There's this, if you can be aware that you're creating pleasure out of the lifestyle. So you go throughout your day after that wondroful sexual moment and you enjoy your coffee or your drink and you enjoy your conversations and you enjoy your creating at your work, you're staying connected to your body, connected to your pleasure. Essentially, you're still in that, it's a very private thing, but your bodily system stays in this extended lovemaking phase. So by the time you come back with your partner, you actually probably want more.
And you're at like kind of a different level.
You're at a different level.
Where you were.
Exactly.
It's like when you go on that second date and you even like get more out of the second date because you had the first date.
Well, in the explicit part, which we're going to jump into in a moment here, I really do want to talk about what it's like as lovers start to expand pleasure together and what happens after 25 minutes, because there's other things that actually happen that we miss out on when sex is shorter.
So one of the things, and we'll finish here for this part, is that we talk about suction sex a lot here, and that suction sex really is a meditation, and the meditation is that of pleasure. And so as long as you're in a meditation of pleasure, that goes on as long as you want to. And then from this place of pleasure, you get all kinds of inspiration to move differently, to discover, be curious about each other differently. It's going to create added layers of dynamics to your relationship outside of the bedroom as you stay in anticipation for one another. As you start to use this as a drive and motivator in your life, you're going to use it for creativity, for motivation in your own workplace, to bring forward your ideas, to bring forward the projects that you're really trying to accomplish. It becomes even a prayer between the two people in the relationship to achieve the goals that they want. It's a positive conditioning towards the things that you want. And eventually what happens is that this becomes this kind of perpetual energy machine that you get to fuel and nurture between the two of you. And that fuel is pleasure. And suction sex is this approach to conceptualizing sex differently, to then starting to actually move and embody it differently and take a different perspective on how to create sensation from suction as opposed to friction. And then all of a sudden, the question of how long does it last? It's like, well, how long does a dance last with the person you're with? Well, it's as long as you want. Even if the music stops or the song stops, but the body's still feeling that rhythm, you're going to continue.
Exactly. So on this final note, before we go into the next portion, I also wanted to add there's a charge that happens in the space between the bodies. It's called the relational field.
Yes.
And that relational field with a healthy couple who's cultivating pleasure and in that consistent connected space with themselves and each other, that relational field is profoundly healing. It impacts if there's children, the children, or anyone who's around the nearby. So if you're living on a shared property or in an apartment building, wherever that couple ends up being, there's massive influence, and it actually has a calming effect on the community. It has an enlivening effect too, like a lot of inspiration. And believe it or not, because there's a lot of misnomers around if you cultivate sexually, you're a sexual predator. No, actually, if you do conscious sexual cultivation, you become a safer member of community.
Yes, you become responsible with your sexual prowess.
Yes.
And eventually, too, as it's associated with achieving your goals, getting closer to your partner, then the act of sex also becomes it doesn't become predatory, it becomes the opposite. It becomes generative, it becomes generous, it becomes fulfilling on a much deeper way, because it's not one person's pleasure or the other person's, but something that complements and builds together. And I think that brings us to this point of, well, all of a sudden now, sex becomes meditative, it becomes a dance, and essentially it can become, even for those who maybe you're comfortable with the word or not, being in your religious background, but it becomes this prayer or maybe a mindfulness, intentionality, manifestation practice that is associating what you want in your life with pleasure, and then being able to share that with your partner. All of a sudden now you have the groundwork for having sex being something that you can explore and that will evolve over time. And so, well, how long do things last? In that moment, it could go on for as long as you like, but then if you think about it over the course of the entire relationship, if you're constantly building into something new, sex in some sense never stops evolving, never stops growing, and never really ends.
Yes. Shall we jump into the next part?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
To join us for the complete and explicit version of this podcast, just simply upgrade your membership and you'll get instant access.